Alright guys, so for this podcast, we're still working on solving quadratic equations. Alright, but now we're going to do it by factoring. Okay? Once again, just to recap why you would use this way rather than the first way. What we learned last time was we solve it with perfect squares when your equation looks a little something like this. When you have the ax squared term and the constant but no middle term. So now, when you have the equation and you have the full quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx equals c, this is when you use the factoring. Okay? So let's do a quick review of how you did this last chapter, factoring the polynomials. Okay? So I'm just going to run through these real quick. Okay? So remember, to factor, you are multiplying to make your c. You are adding up to make the b. Right? So like I said, I'm going to do this real quick, okay? But the x squared is x times x. If I think of all the ways to make 18, 2 times 9, that won't add up to 9. 6 times 3 will add up to 9. So it'll be a positive 6 and a positive 3. Okay, this is just review from last chapter. Now this next one, x squared minus 9. Remember, I don't have the middle term, but remember, hopefully your eyes see this. This means a 1, this means a 9. They are perfect squares. That's the special case kind. This is where I can just break it up into my squares. X times x, 3 times 3 is 9. Remember, when there's no middle term, it canceled out because there's opposite signs. Okay? Now this last one. Remember, the a is bigger than 1, and I can't divide it out, so I have to solve it with the a bigger than 1. This is when you do your a times c. A times c would be negative 24. So now I'm using my combinations of negative 24, right? So that's how we do this one. So here, when I break this one down, to make negative 24, but they have to add up to 5, so one's negative, one's positive. 12 times 2 would either make positive 10 or negative 10. So I need to try another way. 8 times 3. If I do negative 8 plus 3, it's negative 5. 8 plus negative 3 would be positive 5. So it's going to be 8 times negative 3. So I split up my x as x times x. Whoops. Sorry. I jumped to the next step too early. So remember, we have to split our middle term. So this is 6x squared. Remember, the order doesn't matter, but I'm just going to do the way I have it. Plus 8x minus 3x. These both have to have x's because they come from the x term being split. Minus 4. Alright, so now remember what we're doing is we're 4 terms, so we group it. Factor out from each binomial. I can divide 6 and 8 by 2. X squared and x, I can pull out 1x from both. So 6x squared divided by 2x is 3x. 8x divided by 2x is a positive 4. Now remember here, I want this first term to be positive. So to get rid of that negative, I divide by a negative. But I can't divide by a number. I can't take an x out of both, so it's a negative 1. Negative 3x divided by negative 1 is positive 3x. Negative 4 divided by negative 1 is positive 4. Remember, stop here. If these are the same, you're good. These two are one of the binomials, 3x plus 4. The other binomial comes from the outside terms, 2x minus 1. Alright, so that's all from last chapter, but that's going to be part of what we have to do here. Okay? Alright. So like I said, in Unit 10, we learned how to factor polynomials, like in problems 1, 2, and 3 and above. We learned how to factor in order to help us quickly solve certain quadratic equations. Okay? So here's the thing. Basically, it's just one extra step. These, what you did last chapter, are not equations. Now they're going to be equations. We're going to have all these equal 0 now to make it officially an equation. Set equal to 0. Okay? So you have to first factor it, and then we're going to do something with the factors to actually solve for x, because this doesn't tell us what x equals yet. Okay? So here's how we do this. So let's look at this first example problem. We have 8x plus 9x equals negative 18. Now remember what I just kind of showed you up top. We want it to equal 0, and also we want the quadratic equation to be together. Here the quadratic equation is like on both sides. My ax squared plus bx is on the left, but my c is on the right. Okay? So, step 1, you need to set the equation equal to 0 and get it in standard form, which is this. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's got to be organized like this. Step 2, you're going to factor it. In step 3, set the individual factors equal to 0 and solve. This is going to be similar to what you saw on the first chapter. You'll know what I mean in a minute. Okay. So let me go ahead and write this problem again. X squared plus 9x equals negative 18. So I need to move this over here. So my ax squared plus bx plus c is together, and I want 0 here. So here I'm moving stuff to the x. So I'm going to do plus 18 on both sides. So now the left side is x squared plus 9x plus 18 equals 0. This is the most important step to get started. Now remember, I didn't add 18 to anything because there's no x here. I can't add it with this or this. They're not like terms, so I just list them. Step 2, so now I'm going to factor this. This is easy to factor because my a is 1, right? So I'm going to factor this. I'm going to kind of do this quickly here. 18. My c is 18. So what I'm thinking to the side is I can do 1 times 18 or negative 1 times negative 18. Remember, think about your signs. I can do 2 times 9 or negative 2 times negative 9. I can do 3 times 6 or negative 3 times negative 6. And that's pretty much all my combos. So now I want these to add up to 9. Well, which one of these will add up to 9? Positive 3 plus positive 6. So it's x plus 3, x plus 6. Now, make sure you bring down the 0. This is important because we're actually solving it. So, just like on the square roots, when it's positive, negative, you split it. Here we're going to split this again. This is going to be one equation equal to 0. And then the second factor will be another equation equal to 0. So here's what we're going to do. Okay? You're just splitting it. So this is x plus 3, but it equals 0. This one is x plus 6 equals 0. Okay? I'm just splitting the two binomials up, but they're always equaling 0. This is the key. Okay? Now these are super easy to solve. I do minus 3 on both sides, and here x equals negative 3. X plus 6 equals 0, I do minus 6. And here I have x equals negative 6. Alright, so these are the two answers. Once again, the quadratics typically have two answers, not always. We'll see those kind of things later. But bottom line is it's setting it equal to 0, factoring it like last chapter, and then you split the two binomials equal to 0 and solve those separately, and that's how you get your answer here. Okay? Alright, now here's a very important thing, and let's start doing this now so that when we get to it later, you'll already be kind of familiar. We can kind of connect this to the graphing. Okay? What this means is the solutions, our answers of a function, they occur where the graph crosses the function, where the graph of the function, crosses the x-axis. When asked to find the solutions of a function given a graph, look to see where the graph crosses the x. So what that basically means is our final answers are the values of the x-intercept, okay, where it crosses the x-axis. Alright, so we'll kind of start doing that now with the calculator. Okay, and it's a good way to kind of check your answers as well. Alright, so once again, I'm going to go through the factoring kind of quick here because it's something you already know, but take your time when you're solving it on your own. Okay, so here we'll solve the quadratic equation. Now look at this, x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Now once again, every problem, it's the same idea, but sometimes you don't have to do all the steps. Here, it's already equal to 0. So I don't have to move anything. I just go to step 2 and I start factoring. Okay? So, x and x, my way to make negative 6 and add up to negative 1, it would be negative 3 and positive 2. Okay, that's the factoring there. Now, by the way, if anytime you have a question, because I'm going through these quick, pause it and come ask me, okay? Then here's the new step. I split them and set them equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. And then I just solve it. Add 3 to both sides, x equals positive 3. In this case, opposite is minus 2 on both sides, x equals negative 2. Okay. Alright, now for this next one here, Okay? Scan the problem first. 3x squared plus 3x equals 6. I need to get this in standard form. I need to get it equal to 0, so I need to get this 6 over here, right? So I'm going to do minus 6. So now I have 3x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 0. Now we're ready to go. Now we're ready to factor. Now remember, always make it as easy as possible. Here my x is bigger than 1, right? But rather than having to do it the hard way and multiply my a times c, remember the first easy check. See if you can divide out the first number from every number. I can divide this by 3, this by 3, and this by 3. This will be much easier this way. So what's left now, this turns to x squared plus x minus 2, still equal to 0. So you see, now if I just focus on here, I can factor that very easily. The 3 is here, but if I factor x squared plus x minus 2, the way I will get that will be positive 2 times negative 1. Makes negative 2. 2 plus negative 1 is positive 1. Alright? Almost done. Now here's one thing that's a little tricky. I want to solve for the x. So I'm going to put this equal to 0. I want to put this equal to 0. This 3, it's part of the problem, but I can't solve it. There's no x. So it kind of just goes away. So, first binomial, x plus 2 equals 0. I do minus 2. X equals negative 2. Then let's get the second one. X minus 1 equals 0. Add 1. X equals positive 1. Okay? And by the way, as I'm going through these quickly, if you need to pause and catch the writing up before you go to the next problem, please do so. Okay? And it's always a good idea to just kind of pause after a problem and go back and just look at the steps. Okay? Oh, actually, one thing I forgot to do here is what we talked about on the top. Let's use the calculator to kind of show that it shows the answers. I'm going to go to my calculator, and I'm going to type in this first equation. So remember, go to your y equals so you can enter your equations. And I'm going to just type in the first example we did. X squared minus x minus 6. And I'm going to graph it. Now, all quadratics, first of all, this shape, this U shape, is called a parabola. Okay? So get used to that word. Every quadratic makes a parabola. And now remember, we said that the answer is where it crosses the x-axis. So we said here x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. So look at this. Here's the origin, negative 1, negative 2, and x equals 1, 2, 3. You see? So that's how you can kind of check your answer. All right? The next one. Now, the next one, I can't type it in like this. I've got to type it in like this, because technically the 0 is where the y is. Alright, so if I type in this on the equation, so let me go back here, let me clear this out. So now this one said 3x squared plus 3x minus 6. I'm going to graph that one. And it's okay that the 3's there, okay? It means the same thing. Now look at where the parabola crosses the x-axis. It crosses it at negative 1, negative 2, and positive 1. And look at our answers. Negative 2, positive 1. Okay? Alright? Now, it's still a good idea. Make sure you're practicing solving it, but use the calculator as a way to check your answer. At the end of the chapter, we're going to really focus on using the calculator, but it's important to know how to solve these. Alright? Number 3. Okay, something a little different is going to happen here. 7x squared equals 21x. Now remember, I need it to equal 0, so I'm going to have to move this whole thing over here, right? So I'm going to do minus 21x on both sides. So what I'm left with here is 7x squared minus 21x equals 0. Alright, now here's the thing. So remember, I want to factor this. But remember, I can only factor it if it's in standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c. I got the ax squared, I got the bx, but I have no c. So I can't actually factor it. So remember, always look at what you can do. Now I can't factor it into a binomial, but I can pull out my greatest common factor. So I can pull the largest thing out by dividing it, right? I can divide 7 and 21 by 7. So I'm going to pull out a 7. and they both have 1x I can pull out. So 7x squared divided by 7x is just x. Negative 21x divided by 7x is negative 3, and that equals 0. So this is the factor for this one. It's a one monomial, one binomial. I'm still going to split these apart. I'm going to take this and set it equal to 0, and this and set it equal to 0. So here, 7x equals 0. To solve for x, opposite of multiply by 7 is divide by 7. And remember, 0 divided by anything is 0. Then I take the second one, x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3, x equals positive 3. So, I know this was kind of weird. Let's just show that this is correct. It's at 0 and 3, okay? I'm going to go back and type this in my calculator. But I'm going to type it in equaling to 0. So I'm going to type this part into 0, right? Because it's y equals. I can't type this because it's got x on both sides. I'm going to type it in where the y is the 0. So let's come over here. Let's go back to our y equals screen. Alright, so here y equaled 7x squared minus 21x. Let's graph it. Let's see where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, it's a big parabola. It goes off the screen. But you can see, if I follow it, boom, it crosses right here where x is 0, and then 1, 2, 3. 0 and positive 3 are the answers. Okay? Alright, next one. Number 4, x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. This one's nice. It's already set to 0. I don't have to move anything around. I'm ready to factor. This one is easy to factor because the a term is a 1. So I don't have to do anything hard here. X squared is x times x. To make negative 4, multiplying, but adding to make negative 3 would be negative 4 and positive 1. Negative 4 times positive 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So now I just split my binomials, set them still equal to 0, and then I solve. So opposite of minus 4 is plus 4. So here x equals positive 4. Opposite of plus 1 is minus 1. X equals negative 1. These are the two answers. Okay? And then let's just double check again. This one was already set up, so we'll just type it in as it was at the beginning. X squared minus 3x minus 4. Graph it. And like it says, look, it crosses here at negative 1 and 1, 2, 3, positive 4. Negative 1, positive 4, we are correct. Alright? Number 5. So here we have 2x squared minus 9x equals 35. So think about, how do we need to start this? I can't factor it because I don't have it in standard form. I need to move this 35 over here. I want this to be 0. So to get rid of 35, I do minus 35. This now makes my quadratic equation 2x squared minus 9x minus 35 equals 0. Now I'm ready to factor it. Now let's take a look how we're going to factor it. Remember, there's a few different ways. My a is not 1. I'm not ready to go. The easy check is to see, can I divide everything by this number? I can't divide everything by 2. So this is going to be one of those ones that's harder. Okay? So here I got to do my a times c to equal negative 35 times 2 is negative 70. Alright, that's a large number. Okay, but once again, I'm going to kind of help you here. Alright? To make 70, we can do 5 times 14. That's one way to make negative 70. But because it's negative, one number has to be negative. So it's either negative 5 times 14 or it's 5 times negative 14. But look at this. I want to add up to make negative 9. So that means the negative has to be on the bigger number, the 14. So now we're going to split this. 2x squared, negative 9x squared came from positive 5x minus 14x from our pair here, minus 35 equals 0. 4 terms. Anytime you got 4 terms, you must do the grouping. Alright, look at the first binomial. I can't divide these by the same number. So now look at the variable. I can pull out 1x from both. So if I divide by x, 2x squared divided by x is 2x. 5x divided by x is positive 5. Alright, second binomial. Negative 14x minus 35. I got to get rid of that negative, so I'm going to divide by a negative. I can divide 14 and 35 by 7. Negative 14x divided by 7 is positive 2. X, negative 35 divided by negative 7 is positive 5. And that still equals 0, bring everything down. Check it, I'm good. These are both the same. So those two common binomials make half of my answer. The other one is the outside terms. X minus 7 is always still equal to 0. So now I'm on to step 3. Now I'm going to split these into two separate equations and solve it. So I'm going to have 2x plus 5 equals 0. And I'm going to have x minus 7 equals 0. Time to solve. Do minus 5 first. And I have 2x equals negative 5. Alright, and then I divide by 2. And we're going to have x equals negative 5 halves. Okay? And then here, I'm going to do plus 7. X equals positive 7. So our two answers are that x equals positive 7 and negative 5 halves. Now that's kind of hard to understand what it means sometimes. If you put that in your calculator, negative 5 divided by 2 is negative 2.5. So let's verify the answers with our calculator. Let's come back to the y squared screen. Let's type in the equation in standard form. So after we move things around, it was 2x squared minus 9x minus 35. Let's check our graph out. This is a huge parabola. It's way off the screen. But let's look at the easy one first. It's positive 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It crosses there. And then remember, negative 5 halves is negative 2.5. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. See, it crosses between negative 2 and negative 3. That's the negative 2.5. We are, in fact, good. Alright, last example here. Now we got 5x squared equals 25x. I always need it to equal 0. So I'm going to move this term over here by doing minus 25x. So now my left side is 5x squared minus 25x equals 0. Alright, now this is kind of like another one we saw. Remember how we do these? I can't factor it like this because I don't have it in regular form. I don't have my constant. So always look at what you can do. I can simplify this by dividing out 5. And I can divide out 1x. So 5x squared divided by 5x is x. Negative 25x divided by 5x is negative 5. Okay, so now I got a monomial and a binomial. We're going to split them up, set them equal to 0, and solve for x. 5 times x, opposite is to divide by 5. X equals 0. Always, if you're confused about the 0, put it in your calculator. 0 divided by 5. And then opposite of minus 5 is plus 5. X equals positive 5. So these are the two x values, 0 and 5. Let's once again check it. We're going to type it in where it equals 0, this form. Okay? So let's come back to our y screen. Let's reset it. So here we got 5x squared minus 25x. Let's check. Oops. I didn't have my minus sign. Okay. 5x squared minus, there it is, 25x. Let's graph this parabola. Alright, so here it crosses at 0 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is what we got. Okay, so as you go on to your individual practice, two things to really be careful of here. Take your time and solve it. Remember the different ways to factor, but check your answer using the calculator. Get comfortable with that now so that at the end when we really use the calculator, you'll already kind of have a head start. Alright, and always ask questions if you're stuck.